Oh, yeah. Good morning, and welcome to the original Loretta Brown Show, radio to open the heart, heal the soul, and awaken the consciousness. Good morning, Benny. Good morning.
I'm doing great.
Thank you. And
I'm an odd kind of cough. It almost sounded like you were ready for to say a joke or a punchline or something.
I was debating it.
Oh, really?
I may have told you that I had a listener one time tell me that she loves my show, but I'm just a little energetic for, 8 in the morning on the Pacific Coast.
I get the same thing at 4 o'clock in the morning when I'm getting my coffee, and they're like, do you not need that? I think that's probably a good thing, but I still do.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm like you. We're morning people. We enjoy.
I like to get up, and I love the sunrise and the freshness of the early morning. And of course, today we're going to talk about mountaineering and mountains and nature. And I just love that. You do have to get up early to enjoy that. You do. It's part of the gig. It's part of the deal. Yeah.
Part of the world, part of life.
But the best part about these shows is that we're recorded and archived, and you can listen to us when you want to. So,
And also check out, we are streaming live on YouTube if you guys want to check that out. It's 1150 KKNW, and then we're all there, and then you can smile and wave to everybody like I'm doing right now.
Thanks. And I'm only taking a moment to do this because I've had several people say, Loretta, where can we find your show? And I'm like, well, the KKNW website, right, has got everything archived. And then the YouTube, right?
Yes.
The KKNW 11.
YouTube.
Yeah.
Right.
The YouTube. And also these shows are on all kinds of podcasts, Podcast One, iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud. Somebody even said they found it on Audible the other day. So who knows, right? And I have hundreds of shows, because
you have thousands of shows, don't you?
I probably do have thousands.
You're in the
shows.
Thousands for sure. I think we're past 100.
I think we are. I've been around for just a couple of years, and it's interesting because just a couple. And I always have to thank Benny, because Benny, I just think you're the best. And thank you for being there for me.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm glad to be along for the ride.
Thank you.
Or at the top of the mountain. Oh, hey.
Top of the mountain.
Top of the mountain. I do need to go climbing with you one time, though. That should be fun. I mean, we've done a couple, you did a couple shows via remote, so to speak.
I did.
And those seemed like some pretty good, I guess, areas to mountaineer or climb. And you can actually go back and find those shows, too.
That's exactly right. And then also Egypt, which I did some shows about Egypt, too. So, anyway, we're having fun. I'm getting antsy. We've been all, pandemic for a year, and I'm ready to get out and go do something, right? And I do think nature is the great healer. And even if all you're doing is taking a walk, please do it. So, anyway, I'm the owner of Reiki Oasis, located right here in the greater Seattle area. For the last 27 years, we are still around. I've been doing lots of stuff through Zoom, but do check everything out at the scheduler. Can't say that, but you can schedule everything on the scheduler. I think I'll give it up. Schedule.reikioasis.com. I do a Sunday meditation every Sunday at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And if you can't be with us at 11 a.m., sign up anyway. I'll send you a recording of the meditation. I just think it's a really great way to kind of go and stop, take a moment. How am I feeling? What's going on? And let me just really enjoy it. So anyway, you can tune into that. And then my monthly class for women, the Temple of the Divine Feminine, it will be Saturday, May 22nd. That is a Zoom class, so you can join us from anywhere. So just check it out. And a very brief check-in with astrology, because I want to spend a lot of time with my guest today, who just feels like he's already in my heart. And we climb some of the same mountains at different times, but the mountain has memories and it does call you. So we'll get into that. But today, May 13th, is kind of a big day. Jupiter enters Pisces. People say, Loretta, what does that mean? And Jupiter in Pisces, it's its home. So it loves it there. And it's going to stay there until July 28th. So in the next 2.5 months, we're going to get a little taste of what this means, because then Jupiter will exit Pisces and then go back into Pisces at the end of December and it will be there until May of 2022. And then it backs back out and goes back in from October to December of 2022. And this is a very lucky alignment, is what they say. But I'm kind of this girl. Luck is really great. But you got to, roll the dice and throw yourself out there if you're really going to benefit from the luck. I hate to tell you this, but no one's going to do it for you. Like when I was climbing Kalish, and I thought, what am I doing here? I'm not a mountaineer. No, it's like, I'm at the home of the gods, the abode of the gods. Could you guys just help me? And I've literally heard, I swear to God, I heard someone say, we're here. We're holding the space, but you have to keep walking. So no helicopter for you. But that beautiful hope and that luck and that blessedness can be with you anytime. So like I say, many people look forward to Jupiter in Pisces because it is a very, very auspicious placing of the planets. Jupiter feels at home and can be as wise, as spiritual, and as big picture as he wants. The last few years, Jupiter's been hanging out with Pluto and Saturn. They don't really get along that good, and it's been really hard. But with Jupiter moving back home today, our sense of faith and optimism will finally be restored. Jupiter is also joined by Neptune in Pisces. Both of these planets are rulers of Pisces. When Jupiter, with its larger than life optimism and sense of expansion, and Neptune, with its mystical vision, are in the same sign, we will start to see magic everywhere. So it's going to bring to the forefront those things that maybe you've been wanting to do. Maybe you've needed to refresh your dream. Maybe you've needed to take a deep breath and say, you know what? I'm going to capture a vision. I'm going to make a trajectory. I'm going to make a plan. I'm going to go on a trek. I'm going to go toward a pointy mountain that I don't know the name of. And you know what? It will lead you forward, and you never know what will happen. And obviously, I'm segueing into my guest. I'm very excited to have on my guest today somebody who definitely chose a trajectory, headed towards it, only to discover that synchronicity and destiny may simply lead us to karma. Uh-oh. Mike Chow, mountaineer and entrepreneur, is the author of A Story of Karma, Finding Love and Truth in the Lost Valley of the Himalaya. In 2012, Mike and his wife, Chantal, undertook an expedition deep in the Himalaya of northern Nepal into a remote valley that had been closed off to outsiders for decades. What unfolded in the mountains forced him to question his values, his own identity, and completely changed the trajectory of his life and possibly the meaning. Welcome to the show, Mike. It's really great to have you here.
Thank you, Loretta. Yeah, thanks for having me on the show. I'm very excited to be here.
I'm excited. I was telling Mike before the show that, I climbed the Annapurna circuit 20 years ago. I can't believe it was that long. In fact, when I was thinking about it, I went, oh, it's just 10 years ago. And I went, no, it's 20, right? So I celebrated one of my birthdays that will go nameless at Kathmandu. I did, some divey little place. And so I was really thrilled to have you on the show. But anyway, I want to kind of jump right in because you are a mountaineer and an entrepreneur and a spiritual person. You really are. How did you get into mountaineering?
Well, no, I mean, that's a great way to start. Actually, it's interesting because I had always been around the mountains for as long as I can remember. We grew up on the West Coast here, of course, surrounded by mountains. But my father, he's an avid outdoors person, and he used to take my sister and I camping in one of those camper vans, with the pop tops. And so we'd go around the states and to the Rockies, Yosemite, all these different places, and so I'd kind of constantly have these mountains around me, these mountain vistas, and I didn't get into climbing when I was younger, but I'd kind of be around that terrain, so it almost became a part of me. And then I remember when I was 17, I think, yeah, 17, I went out with this one gentleman. He was a very experienced mountaineer, and we were on a hike, and he said, Mike, I want to take you up a mountain. And I thought, well, okay, I have no idea what that means, but
you were just a kid.
I was just a kid. I didn't know, right? So I thought, but as a 17-year-old teenager, right? Like let's go for it, right? And so he lent me his ice axe and his crampons, his harness, and off we went. 4:00 in the morning, we went up this mountain. And it was pretty technical climb. And I remember we were kind of getting towards the top of the peak there. And it was this sort of icy snow slope that like a hard pack thing. We were kicking our way up. And, I remember him looking down from above. He said, just kick in with your crampons, plunge in with your ice axe. And if you fall, dig in with the pointy end of your ice axe. Okay, I got this. So just, kicking, plunging, kicking, plunging. And I remember at one point I was so exhausted. I'd never done anything like that before in my life. And all I could think about was just, don't fall. But I remember one point I just stopped and I looked over my shoulder, and on the horizon, the sun was just rising at that point. On the horizon were all these distant peaks, peaks that I had no idea even existed. And they were kind of illuminated in this kind of orangey, purplish hue from the sun coming up. And I thought, in that moment, there is this whole world up here that is totally unknown to the rest of us and only accessible by our will to climb. And that for me was just it. In that moment, I thought, mountaineering, the mountains, being up here in this little new world, this whole new world up here. This is it for me. And I just kind of dove into it with intensity and never looked back.
I love your story. It's trial by fire. Right?
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, there's colds. Don't worry about it. Just keep walking. Right?
Yeah. Sometimes you got to dive in.
But I was remembering back, I really am not a mountaineer. I'm not trained in that. I just love the outdoors and did a lot of hiking. And when I went on my trip with a beautiful spiritual group of people to Annapurna, I didn't really know what I was getting into. I'll be honest with you. And I thought, oh, this will be lovely and spiritual. And I'm in Nepal and I'll meditate while I'm walking. No, it was just like what you're saying. It's like step, breathe.
Yeah.
Step, breathe.
Oh, right? And that high altitude will get to you, right?
Exactly. So I so relate to that. I love that story. Yeah, just yeah. And if you fall, just
just
grab it with your pickaxe.
Yeah, it's like, well, what happens if that doesn't work? I don't know. I didn't think about that.
Make a nice yell and just keep yelling. I don't know, but that's so lovely. And I also have a quote from your book because like I say, I love the outdoors. Anything in nature to me is that is our church. And when I read this in your book, I just have to read it to the audience. You quote your friend Joe in the book, who I think you just mentioned, where he says, it's better to be in the mountains thinking about God than to be in church thinking about the mountains.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. One time, Joe, he said that to me, and we spent a lot of time, him and I, in the mountains and in nature, and you'd be out there and just having these very divine moments. It could be just the way the light shines on a on a peak or on a little stream or something, or just being in, immersed in that nature. And it was kind of a reminder that we are nature, right? So being out there and with those elements, the heightened sensitivities, kind of allows us to connect with who we are at the very core, right? Because if nature is who we are, well, that immerses us directly. It's almost like a direct conduit back to our true self.
Yeah, I love what you're saying. When I was coming down from Annapurna, coming down right above the base camp, my Sherpa had me, I ended up with a personal Sherpa because I'm not a trained mountaineer, so thank you. all it is.
Yeah.
But he showed me how to ski on my boots down the glacier, and it was absolutely blue sky, beautiful weather. So she wanted us to come, obviously, she, the mountain. And I had this sense, like you said, of just so much expansion and this connectedness to all that is. And, you know, I was gone on that trip for about 3.5 weeks, right? Almost a month. And I remember landing in the SeaTac airport. And when I came out, I was compressed by the buildings.
Right. Yeah.
I was like so aware of the buildings, and I thought, wow, this has really altered me. So I just wanted to bring into the show this beautiful love of the mountains and really what their benefit is to us. But that other world up there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. There's a lot we can learn from them.
So you were pulled by a particular pointy mountain. Do you want to tell us how that began and what happened?
Yeah, well, this pointy mountain. So this was in Nepal in the Himalaya, and this is back in 2011. And I had wanted to go to Nepal for, you know, since I was a kid, right? I remember looking at the pictures. Actually, my sister gave me this book once. It's a Lonely Planet book called Trekking in the Nepal Himalaya. And I remember getting this book for Christmas one year, just kind of was tearing through the pages faster than I could even read anything. And just, I remember like looking at the pictures of the people and the mountains, the culture. I mean, it was just almost like an overload. And I all I could think about was just to run out of the house. I mean, I was still in my pajamas, but like just to run out of the house with that Lonely Planet book and just to head to Nepal at once. But it wasn't until my early
Mike, I see why you climb mountains. I get it.
Yeah. When I get onto something, right?
Yeah, it's clear. Yeah.
But yeah, but it wasn't until my early 30s that I finally made it there. And part of the reason was I couldn't decide, you know, what I wanted to do, right? And you know, part of it was I didn't have the money when I was younger, and I couldn't take a big chunk of time off, you know, when I was working on my career and things like that. But also I was kind of convinced that I wanted to go somewhere sort of off the beaten path, right? And I didn't know where that was. And as you know, circumstances had it, my wife Chantal and I, we ended up sitting down with this one gentleman one day in a restaurant, and his name is Mick, and he said, you know, Mike, I got to tell you about this place. I got to tell you about the Lost Valley of Narfu. And it was in that moment that I thought, wow, okay, what is this? There was something familiar, you know, energetically familiar about it, right? Yeah. And he started showing me kind of the pictures and of the people and this and that. And I thought, wow, this is the place. This is the place that I've been dreaming about. And Mick had been trekking in the Himalaya for over 20 years into some of the most obscure places. And that valley had just been opened up a few years prior to that. And before that, it had been closed off to the outside world for hundreds of years, right? So hundreds of years, it didn't have sort of a, you know, kind of a connection or an influence from the outside world. So I thought, wow, I mean, this is amazing. So that's kind of, you know, that's what tipped the scale. And then as I was looking through the pictures, I saw in one of his pictures, this picture of this pyramid looking mountain. It was almost like a white pyramid coming out of the earth. And as a mountaineering fanatic and as somebody who's dreamed to climb in the Himalaya since I was a teenager, I thought, you know, that was just it for me, right? And so Chantal and I, we kind of looked at each other. We thought this is a decision in itself, and yeah, so a couple things came together. One was we decided to put a little team together because we understood from Mick that the valley was going to experience some unprecedented change now that it had been open. So we thought, well, let's bring a little team of artists. We'll have a photographer, a nature artist, a musician, and we'll just sort of observe and learn from the people through these different artistic lenses, capture a moment in time, right? And then I had this second sort of inconspicuous goal, though, to climb that mountain. Yes, that was kind of the intention that we went in there with.
Because you had it. in your teeth like a tiger with a You're gonna climb that mountain. Okay.
Yeah, well, yeah, it was very I mean, I guess it kind of yeah, it was very sort of mind driven, right? Whereas, what was calling me there was coming more from, I guess you could say, more from the heart, and more of a deeper sort of soul feeling. But then, the mountain was like, okay, I've got to go, again, ego, all right, I got to go climb this. I got to find this mountain and climb it, right? So it was kind of this dual pull, and they kind of came head to head. When I was in the valley, I don't know if we can talk about it, but
Yes.
but yeah, these two sort of forces, goal versus intention, kind of came head to head deep in the mountains.
I love that conversation because I talk to people about it all the time, right? Yeah, the ego, the goal, the intention, yeah, they kind of came together. I can't wait to find out how that happened. As our interview proceeds, I know more will come out. I love this thing, the Lost Valley, right? Like that alone, and I think you even mentioned it in your book, but that alone would have grabbed me. Lost Valley,
right? Yeah.
What Lost Valley?
Yeah. What is that?
Right? Is it Shambhala? What is that? Right? What is that? Yeah. Having been in that area of the world, I just want the listeners to really recognize, and many people listening may have trekked in the Himalayan mountains, but it is rugged and it is otherworldly. And I think it just by its demands upon you physically, spiritually, emotionally, I mean, it really does demand presence. You've got to be present with it. And also because the Mother Nature, as we say, is ever changing, and her moments come and go like the weather, right?
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, and these are big mountains. I remember anyone who's seen an 8,000 meter peak will, I think, remember that time, right? Like you mentioned with the Annapurna range there. It's funny because as we were coming up to it, I remember there was one point I became friends with this one Sherpa guide named Dawa, and I remember asking him, I said, "Hey, Dawa, what are the names of these mountains? This looks like the Rockies back where I'm from, these big mountains here." He's like, "These aren't mountains. These are foothills." And
exactly.
and I remember the moment I saw that 8,000 meter peak. It was almost like this broken up glaciated ridgeline up in the sky. And I thought it was a wisp of cloud or something at first. And I'm like, why is there a part of a mountain way up in the sky like that? Almost like my mind couldn't comprehend it. So yeah, very vertical terrain and very harsh conditions, like you mentioned, very hard to survive in these areas. They're separated by geographically, they're totally separated from village to village. And yeah, the people, I mean, they're contending with, avalanches, mudslides, landslides, just trying to grow things is hard out there. So yeah, very, very tough life.
Right. So you ended up putting together this team, and your lovely wife came with you.
Yeah.
And you went to Nepal. Now, how long was it between the time you first saw that picture of that mountain, or you got the book about Nepal, until you actually went? It's quite a few years, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, from the time I got that Lonely Planet book from my sister, that was when I think I was 15 or something. So, it was 16 years later and then it happened. So yeah, quite a little while later.
Yeah. And you ended up in Nepal, in Kathmandu. And I think in your book, because you talk about walking around Kathmandu and the contrasting experiences that you had just right there, which to me is like an entry point into the meaty part of your story.
Right. Yeah. It was, I mean, Kathmandu, I've heard there's similar places like that in India, but it was, and Chantal and I, we've traveled to a few places, but nothing kind of prepared us for Kathmandu in that way. It was almost like there was every part of humanity in one place. I mean, first of all, you had the beauty of the the people and their clothing, the women in these beautiful, colorful saris, and the architecture of the buildings, the temples, the monasteries. You'd have people in the streets selling fragrant spices and all the other sort of trinkets that are going on there. And so just kind of just a whole collection of things coming together. But then on the flip side, you had the stark reality of, Nepal is the third poorest nation in Asia and the most polluted city in the world by air pollution. And so you had, that front and center, the people with leprosy and the dying right in front of you, children with matted hair kind of begging on the streets. I remember when we were at Pashupatinath, the Bagmati River kind of coming down, and that's where people go to die, right? They put the people on the pyres and they burn the bodies, and then they shovel the bodies or the ashes into the Bagmati River, and so you'd have these little girls with their pant legs rolled up, barefooted, wading through the river, trying to find any trinket that may have been burned with the bodies, and then you'd have some guy defecating up the river and a family picnicking. So it was just like almost like an emotional overload, like everything, light, sound, color spectrum all across, just coming together in one place.
Yeah, I have been over there and in India and Tibet and in the whole area where. Thank you for sharing that, because I really want to bring in paint a picture for the listeners, and also to inspire them to get your book, A Story of Karma, right? And my guest today is Michael Chow. We're going to take a little station break, and don't go away, because when we get back, we're going to get into what I call the meaty part of his story and his meeting with karma, which is exciting and wonderful and to the point. So this is Loretta Brown. We're going to take a little station break and we'll be right back.
All right, all clear. And we're still live on YouTube, everybody, just to let you know.
I have a million questions for you. I'm sitting here trying to be quiet, and I mean this, I'm jumping inside. I'm like, right, I can hardly control myself.
And as you say, we're just on the tip of the iceberg.
We haven't even gotten into anything yet. I'm just like, we're just talking about mountains, right? Get some breathing. I'm very sensitive too. And in your book, you talk a lot about your wife's sensitivity, which I kind of want to bring some of that forward, because she's really a vital part of this story also.
For sure.
But I can remember my first trip. I went to India on my first trip, and I cried the whole time, because I thought, how do I help? What do I do here? Right. And then you realize there's really nothing to do. Right. You become present with it, and you realize all kinds of things. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I think it opens up perhaps part of us that we never explored before, right inside. Yeah. Just kind of having that right there, this is part of humanity, right? And maybe in North America, we try and, cover up a lot of that or hide it, or, particularly around the death and suffering and things like that. We don't really talk about. We try and keep that away. But, that's part of the beauty of life, the cycle of life, right? And connecting with that, I think, opens up a deeper level of awareness within us.
Yeah, I like how you said that, because it is life happening right in front of you, and it's life and death and sickness and sorrow and joy and color and drab and ashes and flags.
We gotta come back on here.
Yeah, already.
Here we go.
Woohoo! Betty is always got the best music. Yeah, that's right. Let's go. I'm ready. The mountains are calling. Yeah. Anyway, welcome back to the original Loretta Brown Show with my amazing guest, Michael Chow. His book, A Story of Karma, Finding Love and Truth in the Lost Valley of the Himalaya. And we've been talking, but we've barely scratched the surface. So, Mike, I kind of want to get into the trip.
Mm-hmm.
So after you guys got to Nepal and you started out, I want to pause for just a moment, because in one of your chapters, you talk about the journey to Phu, and that your wife Chantal was having a very hard time.
Mm-hmm.
And there came a point where you're in this tent. She's got terrible migraines, which anybody who suffers from migraines is like, I totally get it, like totally, right? And the locals came and you ended up singing together.
Yeah, that was a pretty interesting scene because so Chantal has been suffering from debilitating migraine attacks since she was quite young, and as you said, like anyone who's had a migraine, I've never had a migraine, but I've seen her go through it, and anyone who's had a migraine knows that it's just the most devastating thing, particularly when you're out in the middle of the Himalaya and you can't really rest in that way, right? So and Chantal, she's very strong. Like we've climbed some big mountains together, but when the migraine hits, it just takes her right out, just floors her, right? So there we were in the middle of this lost valley, just getting into what I would call the core of it, just sort of on the outskirts, but we're starting to see some of it. And Chantal's hit with this full blown migraine attack. And she's debating whether to turn around because it's too painful to go any further. And I was thinking, what does this mean for all of us, right? What does this mean for the journey? And this is the place that I've dreamed to be in my whole life, pretty much. And I was practically vibrating from the energy of the place. But of course, I don't want to leave Chantal, right? So I would go down with her, but I was kind of struggling with all these thoughts. And one night, walking outside the tents and this beautiful clear sky, the most beautiful starlit sky I'd ever seen. You could see the hues, the purplish hues of the Milky Way, and the planets pulsating, and the millions of stars just lighting it up. And I was walking there by myself, just thinking, is this it, right? Is this going to be the last sort of Himalayan night that I'm going to see like this? And then this music started emanating from, from our tents. And the guys, Jason, who's the artist, and Michael, the musician, they were just blaring out this song called "Lost Together" by Blue Rodeo.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
this country rock band. and anyway, I thought, wow, okay. So I went back in to the tent, and I just said, guys, like, you can hear this music from a 10-kilometer radius. And we were in this little settlement. The locals were there, probably trying to sleep or something. And they were blaring out this song. And I thought, the lyrics, the main chorus is, "If we're lost, then we are lost together." And in that moment, it just kind of came together. I thought, you know what? If we're lost, that's fine. We're all lost. We're all here, though. And we're all here together. And that's really what matters. If we have to go down tomorrow, if this is it, then so be it. This is farther than I've come before. The important thing is just that we're here together. And yeah, a local actually came in, but that's a different story.
I love that so much, because here you are in the Lost Valley, and here there are people that live in their community. And as you say, if we're lost together.
Mm-hmm.
And I almost feel like it was a foreshadowing of what was coming.
Yeah, almost serendipitous, isn't it?
Very serendipitous.
Yeah. And actually, it was funny because there's this one old woman who came in, and she just kind of came under the tent flaps, right? While we were playing, and just all of us came to a dead silence, like, oh, and I thought, did we disrupt her? Did we wake? Are we going to be in trouble here? And she just kind of sat down again, very weathered, very, you could tell that the elements had taken their toll on her, but very beautiful, very kind in the eyes, very soulful, right? We can talk about that, but she just kind of sat down and almost like gestured for us to keep playing. And I thought, wow, okay, this is interesting, because we're seeing their world. We're kind of coming into their world. But, maybe we're also kind of a window for her into our world, right? Through this music and through this gathering. So it was a very special moment, and she was very appreciative of we kept playing some music. We played, or Michael played Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah, and we were just singing that together. And she was taken by the whole. I don't know if she'd ever heard music like that before.
Yeah, I'm a music person. Used to teach music in elementary music in one of my previous lifetimes, in this lifetime, and I just see the power of music. You know, it brings us together, and music and nature, best thing ever, I think.
Totally.
I believe in kumbaya around the campfire. Don't hold it against me, but it does bring us together, doesn't it?
It's like a universal language, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, you were able to continue on, and Chantal was able to continue on. And I'm going to jump forward a little bit. Were you able to find and climb your mountain?
Well, so we found it. I mean, we spent 2 days reconnaissance out there, and just in some of the most breathtaking landscapes. You know, herds of these mountain sheep, baral, they call them, hundreds of them just coming down the mountain slopes. You know, these glaciated, just canyons of glaciated ice. Some of the most breathtaking things I'd ever seen. And then we found this pyramid mountain, and I thought, wow. But what was happening though was, on our way towards the mountain, that's where everything started falling apart. So we got, my two Sherpa companions and I, we got caught in a snowstorm at 17,000 feet. My mule that was carrying my climbing gear took off on me. So all this stuff kind of started spiraling out of control, and it just sort of forced me to hunker down in that most remote outpost village in the valley, the village of Phu. I was kind of stuck. I was brought to a halt right there. And it was there that I started connecting a lot with the locals, but also with myself, and kind of what that journey was really about.
Yeah. And what was the journey about?
Well, it took me a while to figure it. You know, it was almost like I was in this Jekyll and Hyde like conversation with myself for days, and almost part of, you know, when you have something so embedded in your mind that it becomes part of your identity, and that you feel like this should be something that I'm doing in my life, and then it gets questioned, and so then that forces you to question your whole identity. The Tibetans have a word for that, the bardo, you know, that state of transition, right? When you're coming through that state of transition, you have to decide, you know, how do you want to move forward? What do you want to let go of that perhaps no longer serves you? You know, what do you want to focus on, you know, as you move into this so-called new life? So that's exactly what was happening to me in the mountains. And I remember I met this one young gentleman named Sanam Dorje, and he had just come back to Phu. He was from there, but he left the village when he was 14 to go study. He had to go all the way down to India to get an education. And he had just come back after 7 years. 7 years he hadn't seen his home or his parents, his family, and our paths happened to cross exactly just at that moment. And so Sanam Dorje and I, we would end up taking these walks together, these daily walks, and he would teach me about Buddhism and about you know, the people, the culture, their way of life, and the plight of the people. You know, how hard it was to survive out there, and how a lot of the, you know, old or sick would just end up dying in their own homes. And the kids, you know, by the time they're 5 or 6, they have to work in the fields. Infant mortality rates were so high. You know, 2 out of 5 kids died before the age of 5. The girls at that time, when they were 14, 15, they'd have to start getting married, having their own families. So I was learning all these things, and it got me thinking about, you know, why am I suffering so much about this mountain, when in the grand scheme of things, it actually doesn't really matter.
Very good point. Very, very good point. And I think that kind of alludes back to something I was talking about earlier. Like, we can become so focused on what we think something is about, or that is for us, that we can miss something that might be greater that's going on, or something else going on, which brings me to, so you didn't actually get to climb your mountain. You had an experience, a powerful one. You had a couple of extra days. And so how did you meet your karma?
Yeah. So Yeah, no, because I didn't climb the mountain, that afforded us a couple extra days, as you said, to go to this other little village called Nar. And there's two main villages in this whole valley, and Fu was one and Nar was the other. And so we went there, and I learned, when we got there, I learned that there was this little Stolen school. And I thought, wow, and everything I'd learned from Sanam Dorje about the education and about access to outside education was kind of coming front and center in my mind. And I thought we should go check out this school and see what's going on there. And so we get there, and there's this little girl, this little 7-year-old girl at the front of the class, teaching English numbers to this group of 17 kids ranging from about 3 to 7 years old. And she was teaching with such poise and such confidence and such passion. And I thought, wow, this is interesting. And why is she teaching the English numbers? I mean, Nepali script is totally different, right? So that was and there was something different about her, something almost familial that we'd seen hundreds of kids right up into that point, but Chantal and I kind of felt this, strange pull towards her. I couldn't quite understand it. But then the kids, they caught sight of Michael's guitar, right? He was slung over his shoulder, and they'd never seen a guitar before, let alone heard one. And we found the teacher. He was kind of looming in the back, and he comes from a totally different part of Nepal. He had been sent to that little school there, which scratched the surface of maybe grade 1. And he told us that he had felt like he'd been banished to the end of the earth. But he said, yeah, you should teach them some music. He thought, okay, that would be a way to pass the time, I guess. So Michael gets up there, and he's an entertainer, and he just gets right into it. And the kids, I mean, they're just singing and dancing. You can imagine them, these 17 Himalayan kids, clothes unraveling at the sleeves kind of thing, but and these massive 7,000 meter peaks behind them, just getting into this music. And it was just the most beautiful scene. And then the teacher, I guess he got motivated. He brought out this Nepali drum, and he wanted the kids to dance one at a time in front of us. And he started with this little girl who had been teaching so confidently before. He told her, he said, you like dance now, right? And you could see her. She was just kind of in the corner, just petrified, starting to almost internally cry. And Chantal, she couldn't take it. So she marched up there right next to this little girl and started doing her best impression of this Nepali dance with her arms waving around. And Chantal didn't really know what she was doing, but the little girl kind of forgot about everybody watching, and she started focusing all her attention on Chantal, their eyes locked. And this little girl started trying to copy Chantal's improvised moves, and the two of them were dancing in front of these big peaks. It almost felt like time itself ceased to move for a moment.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the beginning of what came next. I don't know how much time we have to get into it, but that was the spark that created this deep family connection that would unfold over the next 9 years. We learned her name is Karma, this little girl, and her family, and her little sister Pemba, and just how our lives kind of have grown together over 9 years. And all trying to navigate all these different dichotomies of our world, because Karma she showed such a strong passion for education, and so we thought, how do we work with her parents in a way? And we learned from her parents that education for them, for their daughters in particular, is the biggest blessing that they could ever dream of. And so we said, okay, how can we work together, for parents? We became kind of co-parenting, right? 4 of us coming together to help these 2 little girls in the best way when these 2 worlds are coming together, their traditional world of their 17th century kind of little village in the mountains coming head to head with this modern sort of tornado that's moving into every area of the world as we speak. How do we navigate all of that and do it in a way where Karma and Pemba are equipped with the tools so that they can make choice in their lives and at the same time not lose sight of their cultural identity, their roots, their
roots.
dharma and their Buddhism.
Yeah. I want to tell the listening audience, you need to just get his book, A Story of Karma by Michael Chow. This is, to me, one of the most remarkable things. So you went to climb a pointy mountain and came back as parents and connected. Yeah. And really, I encourage people to read it, because your description of their life, how you went and met the mother, and the father was out, I think, yak herding or something. And they had 6 children, and you basically kind of took over a lot of things with Karma and her younger sister, Pemba, who, just for the listening audience to clarify, that's been a 9-year journey, and you actually brought them to Canada at some point for education. And I think that somewhere in your book, you say something about there's a saying over there, something about better to have a pencil in the hand than a strap around the forehead or something.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
That's one of the things I learned from there's this kind of saying in the mountains, because outside education, it's at that time, I mean, it is getting a little bit better now, 9-10 years later, but at that time it was very, very difficult for them to get outside education. And, there weren't even any books in those parts of, the valley, other than the scripture and the monasteries. And so, their world was kind of a 10-kilometer radius around their little mountain village. And so, so this saying I learned was, the parents, I mean, a lot of the parents are not educated, or they're not educated in that way. But they know that with outside education brings more choice. Again, particularly for girls. And so they say, yeah, we'd rather our kids have a pencil in the hand versus a strap around the forehead, because that's how they carry things up there, with the strap around the forehead. And I tried to carry something like that up there and I couldn't.
No, but you have ended up, after that meeting and becoming involved in that and realizing the lack of education, you've really become advocates for that. And I think when Karma was 8, that you got her into a school, and and I was kind of struck with her thirst for knowledge. Like, there was a book and she just was like gonna eat it, like I've got what's in this.
It was a clarifying point for me, because this school is in Kathmandu. It was started by a Tibetan monk, a high-ranking lama, who fled Tibet in the 50s, and he started this school specifically for he calls them the lost children of the Himalaya, because they're in all these remote pockets so far out in the mountains, they just get forgotten about. So we got Karma into that school. That's a whole nother story, but but I remember.
Can you share real briefly? Because
it's very
because that's crazy.
It's very serendipitous. I mean, Chantal and I, when we left the village, and we met with the mother, and we all agreed, okay, yes, education is very important for them, for Karma. So Chantal and I, we went on this journey to try and find the right school. And we knew that it had to be, again, like culturally aligned. Even in Nepal, most of Nepal is Hindu, right? So in the urban centers. So whereas in the mountains, they're more Tibetan in language and culture. So we spent weeks, trying to search for the school. We searched in Kathmandu, couldn't find anything. Came back to Canada, kept searching, couldn't find it. And I think about a month went by, and I remember Chantal, she called me in one day. She said, Mike, you got to check out this school. And she found that school, SMD School for Himalayan Children. And I remember looking at the front page of the website, and I'm like, oh, these kids look like just the kids there. And anyway, so we wrote the school director. His school director wrote back, and she said, thank you for sharing, sounds like a bright little girl, but I got to tell you that, we've got 500 kids at the school. We're busting at the seams. We've got 400 kids on the wait list. We've got kids being dropped off on the stairs that we need to turn away. And because of all this, there's only one person who can make the decision to admit, a new kid into the school. And that is this 80-plus-year-old Tibetan Lama. And I just, as I was reading this email, I just felt like, why are there so many barriers stacked against one little girl who just wants to learn? But then the school director, Chantal, had included our email address or our address in her email signature. And this school director said, well, but I see that you're in Vancouver in Canada. You may be interested to know that the founder, this Tibetan Lama, is recovering from an illness right now at his monastery in a place called Richmond, which was only like 25-minute drive from our house. And I thought, what?
I love that so much. You can't make this stuff up, Mike.
I know. And Chantal and I, we just looked at each other like, okay, I guess we're going to meet this. And he wasn't even seeing anybody, but again, that's a bit of a story, but we were able to see him and sort of connect and share with him about karma. And he admitted her into the school. And so we went back the next year on her first day of school. We were there, and like you said, we were standing, Chantal and I, we were kind of standing in the threshold of the classroom doorway, and we could see karma. The teacher was still, trying to get himself organized, and this stack of books just plopped down on the desk in front of her, and you could see her just trying to soak up as much information from the books as possible. Almost like that's exactly when it dawned on me, like, oh my goodness, this little girl's world has just opened up by virtue of these books that have just been placed in front of her. And now, somebody said to me, thank you for helping her dream bigger, right? Somebody from there who also had that opportunity. And I thought, wow, that's very telling. A lot of kids in North America, I mean, yes, we have our areas here as well. But most of the time we still have access to libraries and the internet and information and that sort of thing. And kids are taught to dream big here, right? Whereas, there, I don't know what Karma's dreams would have been, but before she went to that school, but her world again was that 10-kilometer radius around her village. So, how far can you dream when that's sort of the barrier of your worldview?
I'm thinking, because like I said during the break, I have a million questions. We're barely going to scratch the surface here, because for me, one of the most poignant things here is this mixing of Nepalese or where they came from in such a remote place and ending up in Canada, right, with you eventually, but getting all this education and also this cross-cultural and, like you say, this expansion of worldview. And due to time constraints, we're not going to be able to go into this like I was really hoping to, because it's just so juicy. But when they came to where you live there in Canada and started school, right? I think that you mentioned somewhere along the line that it was just so different, like the way the children treat each other or treat their, can you comment on that real briefly?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So this was 7 years later. We agreed with the parents. The parents actually expressed interest in them coming to Canada for cultural exchange. And so we, it took a small miracle. That's another story. But when they got here, it's funny because the things that I thought would be surprising for them weren't. And the things that were surprising for them were almost things like, how we communicate, how we connect with each other, particularly how kids connect with adults, for example. And Karma, one of the things she said on her coming home from school was she was quite shocked at like how some of the kids would treat or talk about the teacher, for example. Just again, that in Nepal, there's like this whole level of respect for elders and that sort of thing. And particularly in the village, here, the way we treat elders is totally different, right? So, so that was one of the things, how they connect, how we connect with each other and with those who are older. And there's so many nuances. I mean, I've got stories upon stories. Maybe I'll just tell one real quick where I remember where we were rushing around and we were late for an activity or something. And I remember Pemba, she just kind of put her hand on my arm and she said, Mike, if we were to behave like this in my village, everyone would think that we were sick. Just like, I'm like, you know what, you're right. Let's just slow down. We can breathe, it's gonna be fine.
I love that. So talk a little bit about Himalayanchildren.org.
Yeah, the school, Sri Mangaladip SMD school in Nepal. So this is the school that they got into when they came down from the village. and just a beautiful place. 500 kids there. Again, started by that Lama, the 80-plus-year-old Lama, and he started this so the kids could get an education, but also so that they could be equipped with tools that they could then bring back to their villages, right? So a lot of them are doing that now. They're getting the education, and then now they're able to help their own communities, which is beautiful. I mean, it's part of that cycle, right? So I think that's the important thing. When a child gets educated, yes, it helps the individual, but in their case especially, it's going to help the whole community.
Wow. So we've got less than a minute. Where can people find you, find your book? And one last comment real quick.
Yeah. Well, people can visit my website, michaelschauch.com. So that's michaelschauch.com. The book's available at independent bookstores or on Amazon and that sort of thing. So yeah, I hope you enjoy the read. It's an adventure story, right? And maybe it's great in this time where we can't really move around or travel as much, but more than that, it's a story of deep human connection. It's a story of love and joy and beauty. And I think those are all things that we can perhaps use more of in our world today, especially over here.
Thank you. Thanks for writing this book. I really enjoyed reading it, and I advise it to everybody. And bye-bye, everybody. Blessings and love. We'll talk to you next time.
Sorry, guys, we had to scoot.
That's okay.
Yeah,
Well, I just didn't have enough time. Thank you
I think
so
that was a good
much.
wrap.
Yeah.
I think
Running
that
close there.
wrap will. Yeah.